Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Lee. I'm with the West Valley Homeschool Foundation, which is sort of the parent organization to West Valley Homeschool Social Network and West Valley's newest homeschoolers. I am here to talk to you today about 5 in a Row, which is a wonderful, wonderful program aimed at kids who are pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. If you are new to homeschooling, either because it has always been on your heart to do so, or because COVID sort of forced your hand, either way, this is a great introduction to homeschooling. I think that this program is one that parents and kids love because it's a really gentle approach to learning, and it really helps you as a parent to train sort of your heart and your mind toward learning and how and different ways to learn and how we can learn different subjects just through books. So this is what the instructor book looks like. 5 in a Row, super simple. If you start looking for this online, you will find a lot of them that look like this, but they recently changed the cover art. So even if it looks a little different than this, it just means you're looking at a newer version. One of the things that is super great about 5 in a Row is that these are not super structured lessons where it is do this exact thing on this day, and then on day 2 you have to do this exact thing, and all of the lessons build on each other. 5 in a Row is not like that at all. You can start with the first book that's listed in here, or you can start with the 17th book. They don't build on each other. You will build your skills over time with the books, but you don't have to do them in a row if you in the order that they are in the instructor book. Which is great because if you can't find one of the books at the library or to buy online or something, you can just choose a different one to do that week. So the concept of 5 in a Row is that each week you read the same book for 5 days in a row. And then each day you focus on a different discipline. And the 5 disciplines that you learn through these books are math, social studies, art, science, and language. So your first book, when you open up the instructor guide, is this little beauty, The Story About Ping. This is a classic book that was written in 1933. And one of the great things about 5 in a Row is that all of the 19 books that are in volume 1 take place in different time periods in different places of the world. So Ping here takes place in China. The time frame, it's non-specific, but it was written in 1933. Then you have Lentil, which takes place in a fictional town in Ohio in about the 1930s and was written in 1940. So a lot of these books are classic and are coming up on being almost 100 years old. Madeline takes place in France in probably like the 1920s. It's non-specific, but it was written in 1939. The Rag Coat takes place in America, in Appalachia, in probably like the 1940s. It was written in 1991. It is based on the author's life growing up, but also on the Dolly Parton song, Coat of Many Colors. The Glorious Flight takes place in England and France in the early 1900s. It was written in 1983. This one is a true story. How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. I love this book. It takes place all over the world. It takes place in Italy and England and America and Jamaica and Sri Lanka. It's non-specific what the time is, but it was written in 1994. Grandfather's Journey takes place in Japan and the United States just before and just after World War II and was written in 1993. Another Celebrated Dancing Bear takes place in Russia in sort of an unspecified time frame, but was written in 1991. Papa Piccolo takes place in Venice, Italy in what looks to be like modern times and was written in 1992. This one, very last first time, takes place in northern Canada in sort of modern times. And we'll look into the pictures in this one a little bit, how you can start to look for different things in the book to see when it takes place, when it's non-specific like that. It was written in 1985. The Clown of God takes place in Italy around the time of the Renaissance and was written in 1978. Even though it takes place in Italy, it's based on French folklore. And then this one, Katie and the Big Snow, takes place in America, non-specific place except somewhere where it snows. Written in probably taking place in probably the 20s or the 30s, and written in 1943. So each one of these books, you get to study those 5 topics. So social studies in them includes geography, when they take place, different cultures, oceans and continents, kinds of cities. Some take place in big cities, some take place in small cities, rural versus urban, holidays, wars, people and their relationships to each other, taking care of one another, responsibility, forgiveness, manners. Language arts includes vocabulary, literary devices, things like list making and writing and storytelling. The art includes different art styles, different media, the history of art, color and design, emotion and motion in art. And math includes counting, size, measuring, time, money. And science includes subjects like ocean life, simple machines, stargazing, insects, seasons, all sorts of things. And one of the things that I love about this program is once you start getting into it and you see how many different things can be learned just through a really beautiful storybook, it really helps you as you go forward in your homeschooling journey to pick those things out of other books and other things that you're doing. So I'm going to take you through a couple of the books and the instructor guide to see how it works and what a week might look like when you are doing 5 in a row. So we will start number 1, the first book that is in the instructor guide, Ping, which takes place in China. So on day 1, the very first thing that you would do is read the story. Look at the pictures, read the story, and then you would look in the instructor guide and decide what topic you want to do that day. Do you want to do social studies, where there are 3 different things that you can do? You can do all 3 of them on your social studies day. You can pick one of them to do, whatever. For each topic, for each discipline, there are several different activities or topics of discussion to do. In our family, we always did social studies on the first day because our first thing that we would do after we read the book is, okay, Ping takes place in China. Let's go to the map, because every homeschooling family has a big map on the wall, right? It's like the law. Go to the map. Where is China? Find China on the map. The instructor guide even has in the back of it these things that they call story discs, which is there's one that corresponds to every story in the book. And you could make a copy of these, laminate it, cut it out, and put the Ping story disc on China on your map. Then in the map of China, the book Ping takes place on the Yangtze River. So find the Yangtze River on the map. So when you're doing your social studies, find China on the map, and then there's a lesson here that you could do about discernment and making good choices, because Ping makes some questionable choices in this book, and there are consequences for those. This is the one on geography. Go find China, find the Yangtze River, talk about how big the Yangtze River is. The Yangtze River is 4,000 miles long. So that's longer than America is wide. Or the example that is in here is discuss with your student how long 4,000 miles is by comparing it with a familiar distance. You might say, Grandpa's house is 400 miles away, and so the Yangtze is like driving to grandfather's house 10 times. These are very easy math lessons and social studies lessons. It also says, the Yangtze is so wide in places that you can stand on one bank and not see the other shore. Ask if your student has ever been to a place like that. And for tiny little Ping the duck, how scary that might be to be on this big, wide river all on his own. Also in social studies is geography and culture. So talk about Chinese culture. You can see in the book that their dress is quite different. Compare it to what we know in America. You could compare it to some people in America who live along rivers and make their livings there, like people who live along the Mississippi. It says also you may want to discuss the eating of duck as a delicacy in traditional Chinese cooking. Little Ping gets captured and almost gets eaten in this book. And so that's one thing to talk about. Duck is a delicacy in Chinese culture. Have you ever been to a Chinese restaurant? Did you see duck there? Have you ever eaten duck? What kind of food do Chinese people eat? Talk about using chopsticks. When my family did this book, a few things that we did in addition to what was here is there's a part of the book where Ping gets a rice cake that is floating on the river, and we went out and we bought rice cakes. It was I didn't even realize that my kids had never really had rice cakes before. So we went out and we got that. We went out to lunch at a local Chinese restaurant, and the proprietor, who has always been very kind to kids who are in her restaurant, tolerated the kids' questions about where in China is she from? Has she ever been to the Yangtze River? And things like that. So then moving on to your next subject, the next day you would read Ping again and focus on maybe literature and language. So there are a few lessons that can come from Ping on literature and language. The first one is talk about that this is a fictional story. And so talk about the difference between fiction and nonfiction. And that'll be something you look for in other books as well. Another literature lesson would be on the literary device of repetition. There are a few things in this book that come up over and over again. One of which is the book starts out, once upon a time, there was a beautiful young duck named Ping. Ping lived with his mother and his father and 2 sisters and 3 brothers and 11 aunts and 7 uncles and 42 cousins. And every time they talk about Ping's family, they use that exact same phrase: mother and father and 2 sisters, 3 brothers and 11 aunts and 7 uncles and 42 cousins. So you talk about how repeating that over and over again helps you understand the family dynamic in this book. And it also ends with that. It begins with that phrase, and the book ends with that phrase. And so you talk about how that brings this book sort of full circle. On your next day, you would read Ping again and maybe focus on art. I think a lot of homeschool moms are afraid of art. Number one, it can get messy. And number two, if you don't have sort of a background in it, it feels too crafty and not really learning about art. And that's one of the things that I really like about 5 in a Row, is that the art instruction that is in here is really great. In the instructor guide, it will talk about what the medium is that the illustrator used in the book, and then how you can try to recreate not just the pictures in the book, but some of the art methods that are in there. So Ping was drawn with what we think are colored pencils. I'm going to try to get up close in here with you. But some of the things that you would talk about with art is that as you go through the book, it has a certain color palette. It is in yellows and blues and greens. And when you get up super, super close, you can see the detail of the colored pencils, like in the sky. how different colored pencils come together to make the effect of the sunset in the sky. There's one in here, let me find it, like this, there, because it takes place on the river with water, there are a lot of scenes of the sun reflecting on the river. And so one of the things that you could talk about with art is how the sun reflects on the water here. But if you cover that up, it totally takes away the effect of water. These ducks could just be walking a little bridge anywhere, right? But with that sun reflecting on the water, we understand that they are walking a bridge over water and the river. So there are, in Ping, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different art lessons you can do in here. Doesn't mean that you do all of them. Look through them, find the ones that you think are interesting, that your kids will find interesting, that you have the supplies and the patience to do, and do those ones. The instructor guide does a great job in all of the books in walking you through different things that you can do, and how to talk to your kids about different things happening in art. And then as you go through the different books, you get to compare different art styles, see how a book that is done in watercolor is way different from this book that is done in colored pencils. Some of them are black and white, done with either pencils or maybe charcoal. And so that's a whole different lesson. And then, so that on your 4th day, you might do math. Ping has a very obvious math lesson in it, which is that thing about the family and adding them up. It is about counting. This one is pretty simple on just counting skills. One thing that our family did when we read Ping to figure out how many members are in Ping's family, start out with Ping, and we got, you know, like the rubber duck out of the bathroom or something. And then his mother and his father, and we took 2 items of something else, and that was the mom and the dad, put them in a pile. Then 2 other similar items were the 2 sisters, and then we got 3 of something, and those were the 3 brothers, and then 11 of something like paper clips, and those were the 11 aunts. And then, I don't know, 7 pennies, and those were the 7 uncles. And then like Lego pieces were the 42 cousins. And then we counted them up to see how many there were. And so having those manipulatives and those objects in front of us, especially since this is geared at smaller kids, helps understand the concepts of counting and math, and that 42 is this much bigger than 2. And then depending on where your kids are, we also took like one of the giant rolls of paper that goes on an easel, and we wrote out the addition on that. And this was before my kids were doing formal addition on paper, but just for the concept of like, look, this is a giant math problem with all of these numbers put together, and you just did this. You did it, you counted them, you found the answer. Especially if you're not doing any kind of formal math yet, it's training the brain in that way. And then on day 5, you would read Ping again, and this would be your science day. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different science things you can do. You can pick 1, you can pick 2, you can pick 3, you can do all 4, depending on where your kids are, and making sure that you're doing things that are going to make them enjoy this process. So for science, you can talk about the animal kingdom and ducks. Buoyancy. There is a part in the book where a boy is in the river and he has this barrel over here that he uses like a life preserver. And so you can do a lesson on buoyancy and then talk about why it happens. And then do some little experiments like getting a pan of water and going and getting things around the house and seeing what floats and what doesn't. Also, because that takes place on the water, you could do a science lesson in health and safety, especially here in Arizona where so many people have pools. That's a really important one. So you can talk about the boy was wearing this barrel, which acted as a life vest, and then talk about water safety. Then another one for science that you can do is on the reflection of light, which is important to the art in this book. Another part of the language arts portion is vocabulary. And in some of the lessons for the books, the person who wrote the instructor guide gives you vocabulary words that you might concentrate on because they are words that kids of this age really probably won't know. What I have always done with any book we read is I kind of know the words that my kids know and they don't know. And as we're reading, when it's one that I think maybe they don't know, I'll stop and say, what does that mean? And if they can answer me, we just move on. If they don't, then we stop and we talk about that word and then keep going on the book. And here are two different ways of sort of making that vocabulary stick. One thing that, and this is the way that we do it, and we did this starting with 5 in a row, and we do it to this day, several years later. When we come to a word that we don't know in the book, we note it, and then when we're doing our language lesson, we take a note card, write the word, write the definition, and then they draw a picture of what it is. So these are ones that I found that are from 5 in a row, from one of the other books, from another celebrated dancing bear. So the word was actually this word, embraced. What is it? It said he embraced his friend. And what does embrace mean? I don't know. It means hug. And so then later we went, put the word on there, its definition. She drew a picture of people hugging. And I like to put on the back of the card what book it's from, because we save these and they go in a box like this in alphabetical order. And then when you go back to look at them, it's kind of just fun to remember what book you learned that from. So a couple of these, mending or darning, which is from, this is not from a 5 in a row book, it's from another book that we just did. Preserves are fruit jelly or jam. This one is from another celebrated dancing bear, which takes place in Russia, which is samovar, which is a Russian appliance for making tea. And it's pictured in the book, but it's a word unfamiliar to us, and it kind of looks a little bit like a tea kettle, like that. The colors of these don't mean anything. Just in our vocab box, we have some that are white and some that are colored. The white ones are my son's, the colored ones are my daughter's. It's just a visual thing that we ended up doing. Another way that you do it to really dig in on those words is a sheet like this, where whatever the word is that you're concentrating on, you would write it here, write the definition of it, draw a picture of it, and then use it in a sentence. And then just put these in a notebook. You might put at the top the date and what book it is from, and then just keep these in a notebook, almost like you're creating your own dictionary. A sheet like this, I pulled from a site called Teachers Pay Teachers, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end of this. And so then that same process of reading the book each day and then focusing on a different subject is what you do every week with a different book. And it's each one is a beautiful story, beautifully illustrated. They have great messages and life lessons in them. And once you get several weeks in, you can start comparing stories and characters and literary devices and the art. But you don't have to do them in any specific order. You can do it just in whatever order you can find the books. The author of the instructor guide does say, though, that if you start sort of at typical school year starting time, like the beginning of September, then the books will roughly align with the seasons and holidays. So you will end up reading winter books about snow and things like that in December. You'll get to the book Cranberry Thanksgiving around Thanksgiving time, and so on. You don't have to do that. While you can start to make connections between the stories, they don't build on each other, that you have to have read this one before you do this one. So I'm just going to bring you through a couple other books so that you can see how different they are and how different each week gets to be and how many different things you get to explore. So King takes place in China. The book is almost 100 years old. Oh, one thing that I wanted to mention about that is that you can either look at the copyright date, or in the instructor guide, it tells you what year the book was written. One thing that I did with my kids as an extra math lesson is that we would look at what year it was written, and then I would say something like, okay, King was written in 1933. Grandma and Grandpa were born in 1947. Is this book older or younger than Grandma and Grandpa? And then we would calculate the number of years. And then that led to all kinds of other discussions like, oh, do you think that Grandma and Grandpa read this book when they were in school? And then maybe they call Grandma and Grandpa and ask them, and then they're talking about this great book that you just read. And that's exactly what you want them to do. You want them to love it, right? All right, so Paying is number one. And then this book, Lentil, is the second book, but again, you can do it in whatever order you want. This one is also older. When was this guy written? This one was written in 1940. This one takes place in a fictional town in Ohio and is the story of a boy who can't sing. Pardon me. This one is not in color at all. All of these illustrations are black and white. We're not entirely sure, but we think they are probably charcoal, which you may or may not want your students to do charcoal art. But it takes place in this small town in Ohio with a boy who can't sing, but he does learn how to play harmonica. And so the lessons in here, you can talk, the art lesson would be how much different this is than Ping. It's black and white. What did he do it with? But look, that even though he's not using color, look at the incredible detail that are in some of these pictures, and you really get a feel for what this town and its people are like. For social studies, you can talk about small town America and how, and parades and town squares, and what a big deal it was for a train to come through, bringing home people. There's, a small math lesson in here. Our vocabulary words that we learned in Lentil, one of them was whittled. There's this man who sits in the town square, this guy right here, with a knife, and he whittles. And this guy is really grumpy. So that's one of your social studies lessons, is about grumpy people and how do we deal with them? How can we not be grumpy people? Anyway, so our vocabulary word was whittled, and we did a vocabulary card for it. We talked about what it was, but then my son, I think, asked me like, well, can I go get a stick and whittle? And he was 6, and I was like, well, I'm not really comfortable giving you a sharp knife, but what I did give him was a potato and a potato peeler, and he could whittle the potato. There's another one, another part in here where the guy sucks on a lemon, and he puckers his mouth, and everybody else in the town reacts and their mouths pucker. So we went out and we got a lemon and cut it, and all of us sucked down a lemon to see what a pucker looked like in real life. And then you can see, like, hey, does it match the art? Did the illustrator do a good job of showing what a pucker looks like? Does it look like what's happening on our faces right now? The next book is Madeline, which takes place in France, also like probably the 1930s or 40s, because this was um, written in 1939. So again, this book looks a lot different than the other ones. The art is in a different medium, takes place in a different part of the world. One of the things I love about Madeline is that when you can go and you can find France on the map, but all of the pictures in here are real places in France. So then you could do a deeper dive on France and go and find these places and what they are. There's a guide to it at the back of the book that if you want to look into these places more, here's what they are. So whether you're going to use Google Maps or just look up more pictures on the internet of what these places are, what purpose they serve, whatever you want to do. It's like an extra social studies lesson in here. So you've got the Cathedral of Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower, the Opera, the gardens at the Luxembourg, Sacré-Cœur, the Tuileries, and the Louvre as different places that you can investigate in France. For your social studies, they have a meal in here. You could do something simple like just getting a baguette at Fry's and having that as part of your lunch. In the story, Madeline has to have her appendix out. So there's your science lesson. What is an appendix? Where is it in your body? Why can you have it taken out and still be alive, unlike taking out your heart or your liver or something? And appendix, that was one of our vocabulary words that we used. And we learned a little bit about the appendix, and we just happened to have a doctor appointment right around the time that we were reading Madeline, a pediatrician appointment. And so the kids asked the doctor about the appendix, and we learned something new about the appendix, which is that we've all been told for years and years that the appendix doesn't really do anything, and that's why you can have it taken out and it's not a big deal. But the doctor told us at that time that they are not absolutely sure, but they think now that the appendix's purpose is to collect good gut biotics, so that when you have stomach flu, you have a GI problem, and all of those good things get flushed out of your system, the appendix is over there like a little basket collecting good ones and refills your belly with them after a GI incident. They're not sure about it, but that was a fun thing that we learned just because we were reading the story of Madeline in France. So each one of these has the back of the book then, in addition to the lessons that go with each one of the books in social studies, language, art, science, and math. There are extra resources at the back of the book. The one is the story discs that I showed you, that each story has one of these little circles that you can put it on your map in the corresponding place. There are a few other things. Here's a sample planning calendar for the order of the books and when you would do them. And this one is, if you're starting in early September, that down in November, in the third week of November, you would be reading Cranberry Thanksgiving. And so they roughly align with holidays and seasons and times of year. Even the first week in November, how to make an apple pie. That's when, for a lot of places in the country, that's when apples are in season and you might be making an apple pie. There is a sample lesson planning sheet and then a blank one that you can reproduce. The author of the instructor guide makes it clear that you do not, and maybe should not even, schedule every week exactly the same, that it's like Monday is social studies day, Tuesday is math day, Wednesday is art day, and so on. Be more fluid with it, because each book is different, and each book, one might be much heavier on some science, where another one is light. So take a look at them and what's in the instructor guide and plan your week that way. Frankly, I don't think you need to plan that much at all. This is a program that is very easy to just open up and go. You just read, teacher just reads the possible lessons ahead of time. Very few of them need any supplies that you would have to go out and get. It's done with stuff that is around your house. And then it has a few pages back here for some of the books to help with like some art stuff. So this book, The Rag Coat, where Minna, the main character, gets this coat made from her out of old rags using a quilting pattern. Here's a quilt pattern that you could reproduce and color, and your kids can create their own quilt patterns out of paper. Let's see, in Cranberry Thanksgiving, there's a song that they sing, and so it has the words and the music to it so that you know how to sing this song. And another celebrated dancing bear, which takes place in Russia. This one right here. This one, the pictures are not drawn. They are all etchings, which is interesting. But it has scenes of them walking around Moscow, and they talk about Minsk and some other things. But as they walk around, like in this picture here, you can see that unique architecture of Russia. And so one of the art things that you can do is to make a Russian skyline. And so it has examples of the architecture that you could copy these, color them, cut them out, put them on another sheet of paper, the tops of the buildings, and have your kids draw the bottom parts of the buildings to make a Russian skyline. This book, which takes place in Venice, this is a really, really beautifully illustrated book with a lot of bright color. And one of the lessons that is included for Papa Piccolo is about learning about colors, primary colors, secondary colors, colors that are complementary. And one of the lessons is to look at this beautiful painting that's on the title pages before the book even starts, and to talk about different colors. Like, okay, how many different colors of green can you find? How many different tones of red, of purple? And pointing out that that is what gives the painting some dynamism, right? Makes it realistic, is that not everything in the world is one shade of green. And you can do a lesson in complementary colors and see red and green are complementary. And so see this part in the beginning here with the green on the boat and the red poles, and how nicely that looks together. And there is a color wheel included in the book. Then there's a guide to literary devices that you'll talk about throughout. Things like alliteration, having a bunch of words in a row that all start with the same sound, personification, repetition, like in the story of Ping, where they talk about his family over and over again, rhyme, hyperbole, and then elements of a story, because maybe after reading all of these great stories and learning the different parts of them and learning about the art and different parts of the world and different kinds of people, hopefully your kids start to get really interested in writing stories and reading more stories and learning about more places in the world. So there's a guide to the elements of a story, about characters and point of view, and how stories have a mood to them and a plot, that they need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a bibliography, a guide to finding the books, her tips for using 5 in a row with additional curriculum if you have other things that you are doing, how to split them up or bring them together. And then a really big index of different topics and concepts that are in the books and where to find them. So let's say you get to week 14 and there's a question about funerals because it comes up again. You go, oh gosh, you know, we read about funerals in one of the books. What was it? Boom, it's right there. It's in funerals. It's on page 32. And let's just check out what book that is. I think that is, yeah, that's the rag coat. There's a funeral scene in there. That might lead to talk about what funerals are like in different parts of the world, what different cultures do. And going down those kinds of rabbit holes is one of the really fun things about this curriculum, because you start to learn about different people and places and things, and then I urge you to just follow your kids' lead on the things that they find interesting and do a deeper dive on it. If they read Madeline and are really interested in France, go get some books about France. Learn a couple of words in French. Go get some French food. Buy a little Eiffel Tower, you know, trinket for them to have in their room. Along with the art and social studies, one of the fun things to do is to find the flag of the country that you're talking about and have them recreate a flag. That could be a fun decoration in a room of your house or on your refrigerator, or just a fun thing to put into a notebook along with vocabulary words. Going back and looking back at that stuff a few years later is super, super fun. There are a couple of supplements that come with 5 in a row. One, speaking of to do, is there is a cookbook that comes with it. And there is a recipe or two to go along with every single book. So here, oh, I just flipped to France. So this is the one that would go along with Madeline. And so super simple stuff like quiche, French rolls, a fruit platter for dessert. And then each page has the recipes and then like a scrapbooking component where kids could make notes about the recipes, what was good, what was hard, what was easy, whether they liked it, draw pictures, or even take pictures, print them out, and paste them in here. There is another supplement that I do not own that is a Christian character guide and Bible study that goes along with each one of the stories. So that could be an additional thing that you do. And going down on those deep dives, it could be food, it could be that you read the story of Ping and someone is really interested in ducks, and now you're going to do a deep dive on ducks. You're going to get the books out of the library, you're going to watch some videos, you're going to learn all you can about. I urge you to really follow your kids' lead on those things and let these books just be a jumping off point for finding other things in which they're interested and that they can learn about and that they end up loving. Where do you get it? You can buy it brand new. Like I said, the brand new version will not look exactly like mine. They've redone the cover art so it looks a little different. But brand new, these are available on Amazon. But this is a very popular program, and there is a robust secondary market for homeschooling, particularly for popular ones like 5 in a row and some others. So other places to look. Number one, on Facebook, all the curriculum, they all have their own like swip swap groups. So there is a 5 in a row buy sell group, which means that you are searching nationwide for people who have 5 in a row materials. They're used, so a used instructor guide is usually like $15 depending on the condition. And all of these things can ship via media mail, which is a rate at the post office that is super cheap for heavy items. So you can get like a huge box of books shipped to you from across the country for like $7. It takes a little bit longer, but it's a special rate for shipping media items. There's also a great Facebook group where I find a lot of stuff called the Homeschool Curriculum Marketplace, which is a nationwide group that doesn't deal in any one particular curriculum, but all kinds. And people selling the curriculum and instructor guides and tons of books. So you may not find someone who is selling a complete set of 5 in a row instructor guide and the first 19 books that are in volume 1, but you might be able to piece them together from different sellers. And the books tend to be, if they're in good shape, the hardback books are a little more expensive, but some of these you might be able to piece together a full 5 in a row set for, $3 a book or something, $3 or $4 a book. And so those are where you can find these. Some of these books are hard to come by in libraries, particularly the older ones. When we first set out, we could not find the story about Ping in a library. I'm in Peoria. My home library is Sunrise Mountain, and they did not have one. They only had it on Overdrive. And I didn't like the idea of reading it on a tablet or a computer. I felt like, the pictures are going to be a little different. And if we're trying to study these, details of art, I didn't like the idea of that. And so I found my set on one of those curriculum swap groups and found a full set of books that are in really good shape. And I think I got kind of lucky on that one. But if you don't find someone who is selling a full set together, then you can sort of piece it together. And this is where the part about not having to do them in the order in which they're presented in the instructor guide is really important, because if you get it and you can't find a copy of Ping or Lentil or Madeline, the first 3 books, pick whichever one you do have access to and just start there, and then go back and piece it together however you want. A few last tips that this applies to really any curriculum, but I want to bring it up because since we're talking about 5 in a row, which is for smaller kids and is a great introduction to homeschooling for new homeschoolers, a few additional tips aside from the curriculum groups on Facebook. There is a site called teacherspayteachers.com. You will see, like in our group, when people ask for resources, other families referring them to TPT. And what that website is, it is educators creating materials that other educators can use, and it's all things that are downloadable. So no, it's not a book marketplace, but materials that teachers create and they put up in sort of like their personal store on Teachers Pay Teachers, and other people can buy them. You don't have to have any proof of being a teacher or a homeschool teacher or anything to pull resources from there. So if you are looking for, let's say your kids get really interested in ducks by reading Ping, you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers and search for ducks and filter it by their grade level or age level. And you'll find all kinds of things, whether it's you just want some coloring pages to download to go along with this, or maybe they're really into it and you want to do a unit study on ducks. There'll be something on Teachers Pay Teachers about it. Some of them are free. Some of the downloads are like $2, whatever. So that is a great resource. Pinterest is another one. Particularly, I would say, for recipes and like art kind of stuff. And one last tip, because this curriculum includes art instruction, which a lot don't. And like I said earlier, I think a lot of homeschool moms are intimidated by art instruction. One thing that I think is important for this and for other art going forward is to invest in some good art supplies. There is a huge difference in quality between the colored pencil, the Crayola colored pencils that you find at Walmart, and going to Michael's or another art store and spending a few more dollars on some good colored pencils. The quality difference you will see in your kids' art is astounding, and especially when you are really paying attention to the art styles and how watercolors look different than charcoal, looks different than colored pencils, looks different than one that is created with pencil and watercolor, all of these things. Invest in good supplies, which will make their products better, which will make them more confident, and really help them to learn these different things in different styles. That is all I have for you. 5 in a Row is such a great program, and I hope that this was helpful to anyone who is considering it or trying to find where to start. Looking at curriculum online from the company that wants you to buy it, I think is really hard because you don't really get a sense for what it's like. And so having somebody who's actually done it go through it with you and show you what it looks like instead of just the vendor trying to sell it to you is really helpful. And so if you look in the YouTube channel, you will see some other videos of people who have posted, that people have made about other curriculum. And that was our whole concept behind this. We were going to try to have a curriculum fair in the spring where not bringing in vendors, but just having other families set up a table and you could stop by and talk to them about their curriculum. But we got COVID, so we couldn't do it. So here we are doing it online instead. If you take a look at this and you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me anytime. This is a program that I love and I'm happy to talk about it more. Thank you and have a good day.